You're passionate, you take action. That's what passion looks like. That's also what compassion looks like, is that it's about the action you can take.
Hey everyone, it's Amy Lynn Durham, and you're listening to Create Magic at Work. Create Magic at Work is on a mission to equip senior leaders with tools they need to be a true quantum leader and actually understand what that means. Improve employee engagement, retain top talent, and transform your workplace culture to have less drama and stress. So let's start making magic. Have you ever heard what the definition of empathy is, or the definition of compassion? I took a shortcut and I asked ChatGPT, hey, tell me the difference between empathy and compassion. And the definition of empathy came up: the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. Interesting. The ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. The definition of compassion: a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for someone who is stricken by misfortune, accompanied by a desire to alleviate their suffering. A feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for someone who is stricken by misfortune, accompanied by a desire to alleviate their suffering. Very interesting. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to an amazing executive coach, Alison Godfrey. She is part of the Create Magic at Work executive coaching team. And I have brought Alison to Create Magic at Work to introduce her to all of you, all of the amazing listeners in the Create Magic at Work community. And we are going to deep dive into the wise and compassionate leader. And we are going to talk about the difference between empathy and compassion. And perhaps you can decide after this conversation what type of leader you would like to be. Would you like to be an empathetic leader, or would you like to be a compassionate leader? And is there a difference? Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Alison. Alison is a dynamic, highly effective, and goal-oriented professional change agent with a diverse background directing various leadership, development, and growth initiatives. She has consistently leveraged her skills in the advancement, implementation, and administration of sustainable improvement strategies, delivering enhanced efficiency, performance, and effectiveness. Her talent for providing transformational leadership to drive the accomplishment of operational excellence has served as a consistent catalyst to her success. Alison is recognized as a highly effective communicator, capable of cultivating partnerships across all lines of business to promote cohesive business practice and high-impact outcomes. I have to tell you, I met Alison, how long has it been, Alison? 4 years ago? 4 years ago, 5. We were in the same cohort at the Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute. So we both have our executive coaching certifications from the UC Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute. And just personally, I view Alison as a mentor myself. She's an amazing executive coach, and I could go on and on with her bio, but she just has years and years of amazing experience as a CEO, coaching CEOs. Incredible woman. Alison, welcome to Create Magic at Work to talk about this really cool conversation.
Amy, thank you so much. I am so happy to be here, as always, with you. It's so delightful. And you are actually a mentor for me also. You brought spirituality forward in my life and into my coaching.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, thank you for saying that. Just for everyone listening, Alison and I have frequently connected via Zoom ever since we left the Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute. We've, like you said, almost 5 years now. And it's like, when are you going to get on the podcast and share your wisdom with everyone? So we actually were just met up as friends a couple of weeks ago, and we started talking about this concept. And I was like, you have to come on and you have to share your thoughts on this. So let's start off with the wise and compassionate leader. So the definition of spiritual intelligence is the ability to maintain inner peace while making wise and compassionate decisions, even when you're under great stress. So we can make wise and compassionate decisions. We can maintain inner peace, even when we're under great stress. I say a larger percentage of time if we are practicing the 21 skills of SQ, or if we're just practicing spiritual intelligence in general, right? Often what I see with clients, with private clients of ours, and with people in the workplace, there's some confusion around empathy versus compassion. And I often see it just with my client base. I'm not making a judgment or generalizing, but I often see it with women. And they start leaning into the empathy space at work. And from my perspective, it looks like it's taking them on a fast track train to burnout. Can you give me your thoughts on that and why that would be?
Such an important insight that you just shared. As women, we do tend to lean into empathy. And in the description that you just gave us, the definition, that is about taking on another person's emotion and feeling what they're feeling. Well, if you're leading a team, or you have a lot of cross-functional partners, or you are very collegiate at work, you begin to absorb all these emotions. And that definitely leads to emotional burnout. And it's very rare that anybody is taught what it means to be compassionate in those situations as opposed to empathetic.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting from what I understand and from the teachings in the SQ coaching community, the empathetic leader takes on other people's stuff. Just to simplify it, right? They share, like when I read the definition before we started, they share the feelings of another person. If I'm sharing the feelings of another person, sometimes if I'm that empathic, I can't differentiate between what your feelings are and what my feelings are. And then I take on other people's stuff that's not mine. And the way I see that manifesting in the workplace is I walk into a room. I'm just making up a story, but it might be a private client story anonymously. I walk into a room and I feel all of the energy in this room. And I see that there's an issue that needs resolution. And I see that everyone's uncomfortable. And I take it on to fix it, even though it wasn't even my place to jump in and fix it. Would you categorize that as the empathetic leader, as an empath taking that on towards burnout?
I do. I think that the compassionate leader, instead of taking it on and I'll fix it for you, becomes the person that says, I can see you're really in pain right now. So let's talk about what are your options for fixing this? What would an outcome be that would work for you, as opposed to being the fixer? Because you are really diving in empathetically to the pain they're in, as opposed to not my journey, just what you were talking about. It's not my problem. And helping somebody else on their journey. How did they solve it?
Yeah. So the compassionate leader would be more like, oh, I recognize their suffering here. I feel for this suffering. It's not my journey. It's not mine to fix. But how can I be a catalyst in this situation to help them fix it? I feel like it gets into this gray area, or this fine line that you could be a slippery slope where you do fall into fixing. So it's now we're getting into, I have deep sympathy for this situation. I feel for this person and what they're going through. I want to alleviate their suffering. How do I not take it on myself to fix it?
Wow, what a great point, Amy. And really, when you see somebody that is hurting, when is it even appropriate to step in and say, do you need help? Or just allow, sometimes somebody is in pain and you see it and you're not in relationship at that level to even step forward and say, how can I help?
If we're talking about leaders in the workplace and we want to be compassionate towards others, what's a way we can do it without harming ourselves?
Without harming ourselves. I think that I statement you just made is really important, so that as leaders, we have to go in whole. And we have to understand what is our role as a leader. And what I hear a lot of, I know you do too, I want to be inspirational. Well, to be inspirational means you're helping people find a way to take action themselves, not that you're doing it for them. So the true inspirational leader, right? When you're inspired, I want to do that. Well, that's leadership. And helping other people be inspired to doing what they need to do, including asking for help.
So I'm thinking of making wise and compassionate decisions as one of the high level skills of a leader that goes beyond EQ, of a quantum leader. If I know what the fix is, if I walk into, if there's an issue going on at work and I'm clearly aware of the issue, I'm clearly aware that people might feel like they're suffering, how do I not fix it and help guide people to continue down their journey and find it for themselves?
That's another one of those really multifaceted questions, Amy. Because part of me wants to say, show up in the way that you need it in the moment. You can't pick one style. And then another part of me says, oh, no. Help them fix it for themselves. So I think that's a discernment that an individual has to make. And there might be times you really need to fix something for someone, and that's okay. However, the other part is, how do I ask the right questions of the individual to let them figure out what they need to do to fix it for themselves? Because what's right for me may not be right for you, no matter how wonderfully a solution worked for me.
Yeah. And I think that's really a really important distinction for all of us to remember. And it really takes some reprogramming and a pause in what you're doing, because most of the way we've been trained in leadership is to know the answer. You're the director, you're the manager, you're the VP, you're the CEO. So the way that the system has been set up is you feel like there's an expectation to have all the answers when someone reaches out to you, when someone's suffering, this, that, or the other. This takes a little more finesse. This takes a pause and let me ask some curious questions that might be able to help alleviate this person's suffering. And maybe they have some answers from within, or maybe I can offer some teachings that might help them have that light bulb moment. I'm wondering if we can share some things that we've seen with some private coaching clients, anonymously, of course, where there are some key factors or some key differentiators that people can recognize if they've fallen into empathy over compassion. What are some of the signs that you see with clients?
Great behavioral question, Amy. What I see is that the leader becomes frozen and can no longer make a decision, where they have competing agendas of what's best for the corporation and what's best for the individual. And they become so empathetic with the individual that they can no longer do what might be right for the corporation. So for instance, we just went through years of risk and laying people off. And that's painful. That is painful. And for a leader to have to lay someone off is painful. And you understand how painful it is for the individual to be laid off. However, that is what has to happen. So then how do you become compassionate and understand how difficult this is for the person being laid off and have that kind conversation about, I can't not do what I'm about to do, but how can I help you? How can I be there for you? And what might that look like?
All right, it's time for a fun, playful, quick break. And it's time for you to discover your spiritual intelligence at work. So over here at Create Magic at Work, we are not just a great podcast. We are an executive coaching firm, a team dedicated to helping leaders like you create healthier, more fulfilling workplaces. Whether it's through private coaching, transformative workshops, or impactful keynotes, we're here to help support your journey to have less drama and stress and more magical moments in your life. So have a little fun. Take our quick quiz in the show notes and see where you stand. Discover your spiritual intelligence at work. Click on the link in the show notes and reach out to us for support if you need it. Sending magic to you. Wow. Okay. That was a really good example. So holding on to empathy could freeze you. Wow. Yeah, really good. And avoidance came up for me, right? Like avoiding the uncomfortable. The compassionate leader does not avoid the uncomfortable, but they show up in a way that they want to help alleviate the uncomfortable or ask curious questions to do that, right?
Yeah, great framing.
Harvard Business Review had a research that recently came out. It's pretty recent, where they did a study and they showed that they have the cure for burnout. That was the research. Here it is, everybody. Here's our cure. The cure for burnout is wise and compassionate leaders, and you have to have both. And what the study found is that if you have both wise and compassionate leadership in the workplace, burnout decreases by 64%.
That's a big number.
It's a huge number. You've got to have both. So I'm bringing that up to share with everyone. It's not workload per se. It's not loneliness and isolation per se. As long as we have wise and compassionate leaders, they will recognize, hey, maybe we have too much of a workload here. We need to pull back on this. So that will alleviate the burnout. Or here's the next kicker, what you and I are kind of playing with today in this conversation. Hey, do we have compassionate leaders? What does that look like? Do we have a clear understanding of empathy versus compassion? And does our team have that clear understanding? So when you and I got in this conversation, I was like, we have to talk about this, because one of the most popular skills in spiritual intelligence is making wise and compassionate decisions. It's one of the capstone skills. How can I do this at a high level is what a lot of my clients want to know and want to practice. Well, here's one way to recognize if you're practicing it. One, I think it's the distinction between empathy and compassion. It's kind of like the first step in SQ. Well, one of the first skills is that inner work of how do I differentiate between my ego and higher self. Once I can differentiate between ego and higher self, then I can practice seeking guidance from higher self a larger percentage of time. Then I can operate from higher self a larger percentage of time. So now, how can we eradicate burnout? Taking on this big thing today. Well, let's start with distinguishing between empathy and compassion. And now, how can we have more wise and compassionate leaders, which will help eradicate burnout? If someone listening is like, I'm trying to distinguish if I'm an empathetic leader or if I'm a compassionate leader. And there's so much out there on LinkedIn, like lead with empathy, lead with compassion. You have to have empathy. Here's my training on compassion. And so it gets very confusing. And then here I feel like I'm throwing out another tongue twister, like empathy versus compassion. It's, so I want to cut through all the noise. And if someone is listening and they're like, am I an empathetic leader or am I a compassionate leader? And how can I freaking tell the difference at this point with all the noise out there? What do you say to them?
My personal example happened in real life during coaching. And the story is that a client of mine had a dog pass away. She is crying hysterically. I started crying hysterically with her. I went into complete compassion, and now both of us were frozen, and absolutely nothing could happen in that situation except crying together. If I had reacted out of compassion and not out of empathy, I didn't need to feel the pain she was in. To be there for her meant that I couldn't feel the pain she was in, but I would really understand how much she was hurting. If I had compassionately responded, it would have just been a little bit of silence. It really hurts. Do you want to move through this? Do you just want to feel it? Where are you? And I would have been able to get her to begin thinking about, am I even ready to heal? Is there the next step for me? And it's the same thing in a business environment. Are you feeling the person's frustration and pain to the point that you can no longer be there for them? You stop showing up.
So good. So when you started becoming overwhelmed and crying with her, you were operating from empathy.
Yes, Amy. Yes, thank you.
And it froze you in the moment as her coach, as her executive coach, or as a leader to actually hold space for her pain and suffering and to ask curious questions on how she might want to alleviate her suffering. Interesting. I often find myself overwhelmed at times in that way because I am deeply feeling. A lot of us are. And it certainly is a practice to, now I'm like, okay, well, what is that fine line between the permission to experience your emotions and have a release? And, what is that fine line? How do we control ourselves in those moments without feeling like we shut ourselves down?
When you're talking about feeling somebody else's emotion, my practice has become, I can feel the emotion rising in me. And my practice is to stop, take a deep breath, and not say anything. I pause. And during that breath holding, I remind myself that I want what's most important is to be there for the other person, that it's not about me feeling in the moment. And I've practiced it enough that I can do it relatively quickly now. But it takes practice. You don't just suddenly flip a switch. Oh, I'm going to stop feeling what somebody else is feeling.
So good. So good, because you're talking about this other piece of empathy versus compassion is if we are operating in this empathy state of I'll just say the shadow of empathy, right? Like the frozen, I just took on all of these feelings. We actually have turned our orientation back to ourselves, and we are not really having compassion for the suffering of someone else in our presence. And you and I both know, as highly trained executive coaches, we have been beaten, just getting browbeaten for low self-orientation, right? It's not about you. It's not about you. It's that you are there for them. And, you just made that light bulb connection for me that, wow, that turns the spotlight back on you and what you're feeling if you get into this shadow empathetic state of yeah, wow.
Right. Self-orientation is such a great concept to bring up in this, Amy, and relating it to empathy. Yeah. When you are a leader and you go into empathy, it is all about what you're feeling. And you have taken, as you said, the spotlight off the other person.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to pull a card for everyone and we'll see the interesting card that comes up for this conversation today. But I have so many takeaways today because really, like, this conversation for me, for you, and for everyone was to really open up the dialogue around this and get us thinking about these two concepts, empathy versus compassion, and where we're sitting in our lives and in our leadership in that space. Like, I'm not saying that empathy needs to, personally, this is just my opinions, needs to completely go away. That's how we feel. But I think my takeaway today is like, where is that fine line when you're wanting to alleviate the suffering of someone else, and then all of a sudden the focus has gone away from that because you're in your feels. And you're all in your feels, right?
All right, your feels and empathy. That can work.
Yeah. So the wise and compassionate leader is the one that eradicates burnout. Let's remember that, and let's keep playing with that and see where that takes us. And just to check in, when we start feeling, when we're moving through these situations, it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be messy, and it's going to be a practice. And I think that if we just take a micro step on, am I taking all this on? Am I making this about me? Or am I really moving from a wise and effective change agent space of uncovering root cause and alleviating the suffering of others? Okay, I'm going to quit shuffling my deck as I'm chatting because it's probably like getting all over the mic. And the production team's probably like, Amy, you're shuffling your deck the whole time you're talking. What do we get today? Okay, universe, give us.
I'm so excited.
Empathy versus compassion. What do we got? Oh, well, we got part of compassion, passion. We haven't done that one in a while. Interesting.
Wow. Daring.
Yeah, right. Coming up with a little bit of the word there. So we got passion for everyone listening. And the affirmation is, I have great power within, and I recognize when inspiration strikes me. I have great power within, and I recognize when inspiration strikes me. There's a couple of questions that you can pause or rewind or journal on or think on later. But I want everyone listening to think about, with regards to your career, what are you passionate about? And then think about, in 10 years, what do you think your achievements will have included? And Alison, I'd like you to add your thoughts on that. But my thoughts on this is, in 10 years, I hope everybody's achievements will include they've taken a more compassionate and wise approach in their lives and in their leadership over the shadow of empathy, taking on other people's stuff and burning themselves out to be the fixer and the hero. Thoughts on, I have great power within, and I recognize when inspiration strikes me, or any of those themes.
Amy, it's so beautiful because we're talking about what is compassion, and then what is passion comes up.
I know.
It's powerful. Right. It's amazing. So you're passionate, you take action. That's what passion looks like. That's also what compassion looks like, is that it's about the action you can take. And 10 years from now, if we can solidly differentiate between the two, we'll have a whole different class of leadership.
Yeah, we will. Yeah. So let's keep playing with this idea. Let's keep talking about it. Let's keep making clear distinctions between the two and see where we go. Alison, thank you so much for letting me introduce you to the Create Magic at Work community, and for being such an amazing support system for all leaders out there with your incredible background and executive coaching skills.
Oh, thank you, Amy. You are my inspiration, and I love being your friend and working with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We hope we brought some magic to everyone today, and we will see you next time. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming back every week to listen to a new episode of Create Magic at Work and really helping to support and advocate for healthy leaders, workplaces, and lives for all of us. If you want any information on how to connect with me, click on the link in the show notes. You'll get access to all of the social media links for Create Magic at Work. Stay following along for more amazing episodes where we help you improve productivity and profitability in the workplace and decrease stress. Sending magic to everyone, and see you next time.